Very few. No, Caroline.
There's been a coup. We've displaced the other members and have them.
We have a lease, so we're good. Got a quorum. Okay, Molly, ready?
Welcome to the February 14th, 2024 Town Council meeting, and happy Valentine's Day to all. Thank you for coming. I would like to call a meeting to order. While the desk up here looks a bit depleted, with our one council person in person and me, we have two council persons that are on Zoom, John Byrne and Elise Morgan. So we have a forum and we will proceed. So, and the first item on the agenda is citizen input. We'll hear the roll. Welcome. Happy Valentine's Day. We're happy to see you. You know, just
Glad to be here.
yes.
I didn't mean to be late. No, you're not.
So here's the rule for citizen input. First of all, you have to come to the podium. Second of all, you have to speak clearly. Third, you have to state your name. Fourth, you have 3 minutes and no more. And you can say anything as long as it's just not just. Okay, did I miss anything?
Nope, that's great. If, I'll just kind of like raise my hand when we have like 10 seconds left, just to give people a chance to kind of close up.
Battery. Okay, so first person who would like to address the council, please step up. Yes, sir. I don't know your name, but my name's Rush Berg. I have a sign.
Nice to meet you. My name's Gowd and I'm running for House District 48. And so it's up in Harriman, South Jordan, and the third town for getting Riverton. And I'm just here to learn more about the issues that impact all of you out here, and about the gondola and your opposition to it. So
Good.
So I appreciate being here. Thank you.
Appreciate your coming. Okay, next. Yes, sir.
My name is Roy Piscavo. You can see Carolyn.
Nice to see you.
I am running for House District 41, which is this district here. And I am against the gondola as well. And I think I have unique skills because I was a banker for almost 20 years in financing very large projects. And I think the way to kill this particular project is through killing the financing. So idea, but I'm looking forward to hearing.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm an original Utah, Sylvia Nieto Fisk. I'm running for governor and I have, if you look on my website, Sylvia for Gov, you'll see how I feel about the gondola.
Where 4 is a numeral, right?
Sylvia number 4.
Yes.
Yes. And, follow me on social media. My concern is about the gondola and.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia.
Hi, my name is Steve Ace. I also am running for an office, State Senate seat in the 15th district, which is currently held by Kathleen Reedy, as many of you know. I also live right at the mouth of the canyon, and I am adamantly against the gondola, just for the record.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Jake.
Hi, my name is Jake Minus. I'm a resident of Village of Sugar Plum. I moved here in 2017. Like many of you, I'm an everyday skier. My other role is I'm also the Republican Party precinct chair for the town of Alta. You just met all my candidates who are either want to learn more about the gondola or completely opposed to it, as am I. I've had no involvement with the government until last fall when I gave a public comment urging the council to pass a resolution against the gondola. Now I'm back to plead with the council to pass a resolution against the gondola. Let me explain why. I'm out there, you know, and we're in an electoral season trying to build up excitement, recruit candidates who for the legislature or for other offices who will oppose the gondola. It's great for me to do that, but, you know, whatever I can do, nothing beats having an elected, you know, my elected officials have, you know, to be able to say that I'm speaking for my town, and a resolution would be great as a beginning. And so I'm, you know, I'm actually very aware that this town does not like to get too involved in the politics in the valley. I do that, and I just need a few things that are leadership from the town government, which is what we're going to discuss today is a resolution, joining lawsuits that are already in play against the gondola. And then what I'd really like in the future is what I call leadership, making public statements, writing op-eds. There's not really much that I'm asking that you do other than put your name on things, and we'll do the legwork. Now, I'm not speaking for my party here, but I can speak as an individual conservative. The things that upset us most about the gondola are what we hear about in the presentation is the taxpayer funding of this. Why are people who are probably less well off than us, who don't ski, paying for this thing? Now, there's something else, and I'm going to be a little bit coy about how I state it. The other thing that is, I think, especially offensive is that the beneficiaries, people who own real estate interests, you know, in Sandy, where the gondola base is set, are also political insiders. To figure out who I'm talking about, all you have to do is Google this stuff. It's all over the press. I'm not going to say it because I have to be able to prove this through my own due diligence beyond a reasonable doubt that this is the case, but everybody knows. And the fact that these people are fellow party members that are under leadership is irrelevant. In fact, it makes our task as Republicans more pressing to sort of keep our guys honest. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else like to address the council?
And we have some folks on Zoom who would like to, but we'll see if anyone else in the room first.
No one else? All right, go ahead. Molly, you want to call up the Zoomers?
Yes, Katie should be on her way over now. And Katie, you're welcome to unmute and speak at any time.
Okay, welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel a little underqualified to be speaking to you. Like many others that join you, I'm not a political candidate. I'm a 24-year-old from the Salt Lake Valley. I live down in Cottonwood Heights, but I felt it was important to come before you today as you learn more about this really important issue and how it affects your community. And I ask you to use your voice. It's a voice that many of us haven't been given in this conversation, and your community is one that is most directly impacted. I've worked closely throughout this EIS process and following the issue and looking through the thousands of public comments that have been submitted to the Utah Department of Transportation. And there were over 50,000 people that engaged in this process. And that's a really incredible number. Typically, environmental impact statements don't get that much attention because they're highly technical. It's really hard for the public to access that if you don't have that expertise or that knowledge. But the fact that so many were willing to spend hours crafting these comments is incredible. And I think it speaks volumes to how deeply we all care about this issue and how much, we want to find solutions for Little Cottonwood Canyon. And so as you learn today and have the opportunity to ask questions, I really ask you to use the voice that many of us haven't been given and help advocate for your community and for this canyon so that hopefully it can be around for, my entire generation, my children's generation, and many to come. So I thank you for your time and attention today and being willing to listen to folks and learn more about this. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you, Katie. And we have others, Mom?
And then Grace, I don't know if you had a comment you wanted to make now, or if you were just going to join us for the presentation. Okay.
Just for the presentation.
Okay. Any other comments for the public? We can go back to the room if anybody has now thought that they want to say something they didn't before. All right. Let us move on then. They have collectively given a great preamble for the next element, next entry on our agenda, which is a presentation by Canyon Guard, Friends of Alta, and other organizations regarding the UDOT, Little Cottonwood Canyon EIS. And I want to say that this absent chair here is normally occupied by a member of our staff, Craig Highmark, who has stepped out of that chair temporarily to be a member of the public and will be part of this presentation. So we will regard him as not as a staff member, but as a public member for the next half hour. Okay, so I think Craig is going to start off.
My name is Craig Highmark, and today I'm here to speak as a member of the Common Sense Coalition. As you can see, we have quite a few speakers on our agenda, so my introductory comments will be relatively brief. In preparation for this presentation, we interviewed a number of Alta business owners. We discovered that most were only informed at the headline level from the Gondola Works PR website. But PR is just that. It's public relations. To understand what UDOT is legally committed to execute, one must read the ROD. That's why they call it the Record of Decision. The coalition has done that. And I expect by the end of our session, you will learn that the gondola will not significantly mitigate congestion. The gondola will not mitigate for road closure because the gondola won't operate during interlaunch. The gondola will cost significantly more than originally estimated, and by UDOT's own analysis, it is no longer the lowest cost solution. You will learn that the environmental impact is enormous. To me, the most serious concern is the risk of severe water pollution as described in the Laura Briefer memo that was submitted in your pack. But the tower impact on the view shed and negative wildlife impact should not be underestimated. I particularly hope that the coalition will come across as solution oriented. There is a traffic problem in Little Cottonwood Canyon, but there are proven cheaper and easier solutions ranging from the parking reservations adopted by Brighton, Solitude, and ASL to Zion type busing. While we collectively represent 3 different lawsuits, all in our coalition recognize that the lawsuits by themselves will not resolve the problem. That requires action through our government. Obviously, the most important governmental voice is the town of Alta. You represent the area most affected, but so far, that voice has been largely silent. We urge you to make your voice heard. Now, Pat Shea, who I expect almost everybody here knows, will speak.
Not only everybody here, but everywhere.
That's just because I have my picture in the post office. That's why that's, thank you, members of the town council. It was 44 years ago, Bill Levitt, the mayor then, and Mimi, and I found the Alta Defense Fund. And once we had some money in the bank, we became friends of Alta. And we've fought to keep the Alta environment as it is. I wrote my 3rd-year law paper in 1974 on the Clean Air Act, NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. We had the chance to interview Senator Muskie, Senator Aiken, and Senator Baker, who were the main authors of it. And it's been interesting over the long period of time to see how it's morphed a bit. The original idea was that if any federal money was going to be spent, there had to be an environmental impact statement. They had to evaluate how that proposed project was going to impact the environment. And for many years, it has been done exactly that way. However, there's been a bit of a regime change in that a number of federal agencies, BLM, which I headed, Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, have specialists on NEPA. And once they return or retire, they become consultants. And then you begin getting this cut and paste approach. And I would suggest to you that that's exactly what UDOT has done with their EIS. Now, there are 3 lawsuits, one headed by Friends of Alta and other not-for-profit groups and individuals. There's one by Salt Lake City, the Metro Water District, and Sandy City. And I would hope that maybe the town council would give some consideration to joining that one because it's focused particularly on statutes and regulations. Now, we all are aiming in the same direction. Save Our Canyons is the third group, and that is we want to delay the process. And as Craig said, hopefully come to some solution. After practicing law for 48 years, I have to say I'm very tired of lawyers in the litigation. They take a lot of time and expense and don't always come up with the right resolution. Now, I want to make it clear too, because the UDOT propaganda says they had to stop all work on phase 1. That's not true. We met with Carlos Becerras the Friday before we filed on Monday to assure him that we were not seeking injunctive relief. So they could go ahead and spend the $150 million that the legislature in 2023 actually passed. We do expect these lawsuits will be consolidated so that there's not a possibility of contrasting decisions. And we hope that we could sit down in a reasonable way. But a resolution coming from the town of Alta would be extraordinarily helpful, and some consideration about joining the lawsuit. We had a conversation this morning with all the attorneys, and if you can imagine a conversation with 12 attorneys on the phone, what should have taken about 12 minutes took about an hour. So I hope you will be able to do that. Thank you for your time. And now Alan Sanderson is going to speak.
Good afternoon. Briefly, I'm Alan Sanderson. I am a retired research computer scientist from the University of Utah. I was asked to take a look at the queuing times that UDOT put forth for the gondola. In the next slide, I'll address that a little bit more deeply. Actually, go back one slide, please. Thank you. So one of the things that was really kind of asked about this is, well, what's going to happen with all this when we put together and look at all these times? And the real question that comes up is that what's it really going to take to get people out of their cars and into public transportation? That's really the mainstream problem we've got to deal here. Craig had mentioned the interlodging as one of the issues. During interlodge, the gondola will not run, but moreover, when the road is closed, gondola for avalanche control, the gondola will not be running during those times either. And even after they've done all the avalanche control work, one of the issues is the haul road, that main line that is used for the gondola moving, 16 miles of haul road, this technical term, that has to be inspected each and every time. So there's a delay in there of actually the gondola opening. UDOT does not discuss that delay, and that's an issue. We can go ahead into the next slide. So looking at the queuing, one of the first things that's actually a problem is UDOT put out these fact sheets. When you look at these fact sheets, they've got nice times of transit and everything else. Well, there's one problem, and I replicated it in blue up here, is you can see for the gondola, they have times from Port Union and Mackay, but for the bus, they have from the gravel pit. So we're not doing an apples to apples comparison for times. So that's one of the first issues you gotta kind of have to sort out and look at these times. The next thing you have to really do is go in and look in depth into the queuing and what it's gonna take for people to actually get onto a gondola during the peak times. I've tried to back out what UDOT has done, and I'm not gonna go into it other than to say it's wrong. I've actually gone through and modeled this, and based on the assumptions I can put in from what UDOT has given, the average time is gonna be a 20-minute wait for people to get on a gondola or a bus. That adds into your transit time, and once you kind of resolve all of that, what you see in green is what is my first best estimate of what the real transition or transit times will be. We're looking at over 70 minutes versus a car going up the canyon is gonna take 42 minutes. So therein becomes the real problem of how do you get people out of their cars and to use public transit? You've gotta have a big incentive. Let me just give you kind of some other numbers that go along with this 20-minute wait. On a good day, in the worst case, somebody's probably gonna wait about 90 minutes to get on, on transportation. On a bad day, that's when the canyon's been closed, it's gonna be twice that. You're gonna have 600 people waiting at one time for the gondola at any one point on a good day. On a bad day, you got 1,500 people in that structure waiting to get on a gondola. So we've got some incredibly large numbers of people that we've got to be moving up and down the canyon. So really, at the end of the day, we're asking people who want to drive, get to go up the canyon very quickly, but those who are going to use public transportation aren't, and that's a big inconvenience. And this is something UDOT has not really looked at as what I call a social economical issue on it. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Bob Douglas to talk about a little bit of the money.
Thanks, Alan. I'm with Friends of Wolf Mountain Canyon. I want to talk about the cost of the gondola. $1.4 billion. Put that in perspective, that's as much as all citizens of Utah will spend on all state transportation needs of all types for the entire year, for the entire state in the year 2024. 1.4 billion, it's a ridiculous amount of money for 9 miles of road, 20 to 30 days, 3 hours during those days of bad traffic. Now, you should ask yourself, who's gonna pay for that? You're gonna pay for that. In fact, you already are paying for that. 2018, the state raised the state sales tax for all of us. They created the Cottonwood Canyons Transportation Investment Fund, and they've diverted 20 million a year since 2018 into this new fund to pay for the gondola. But it turns out that's not going to pay $1.4 billion. UDOT's most recent estimate from August says that the operating cost is going to be $22.7 million a year. So the 20 million won't even cover the operating costs. If the legislature decides they want the gondola, and they have not decided it, they're going to have to issue bonds. The interest on those bonds are going to push it over $2 billion. But that's not the worst part for this town. The worst part is that the state uses local transportation tax districts to pay for local transportation improvements for gondola. So you're going to pay a disproportionate amount of money for these out of this $2 billion opposed to the rest of the state. Now, you might say, some people say, well, private investment will do this, great investment. Well, you got to have a business case before you get private investment. And if you use UDOT's numbers and do the math to get the $1.4 billion paid back, plus depreciation, plus operating costs, and put some profit on that, which private investment needs, you're going to have to charge more than $400 for a lift ticket for one ride on the gondola. There is no private investment business case there. You're going to pay for it.
So.
Sorry, Craig. My daughter. So if you pay for the 1.4 billion plus interest on the capital funds, skiers will probably still have to pay a gondola ticket price on the order of $100 just to cover operating costs. Many skiers are going to go elsewhere. So what does that mean for you folks in Alta? That means that the gondola is probably going to hurt your businesses, not help them. And it's certainly going to hurt your pocketbook. So I would really urge you to take a public stand against that. Join the lawsuit if you feel so inclined, but at least ask the state to explore common sense solutions that are lower cost, lower impact. Those solutions exist and UDOT has not explored them. Thank you. Next speaker is Grace Tyler from Save Our Canyons.
Yeah, my name is Grace and I'm with Save Our Canyons. I just want to start off today by saying thank you so much for listening to us talk about the gondola and protecting Little Cottonwood Canyon. So I started with the organization in 2017 and I've been with through the entire Little Cottonwood Canyon environmental impact process. And from the very start, the purpose and scope was truly too narrow. The goal of right now for the purpose and need is to really reduce traffic by 30%. This means that Little Cottonwood Canyon will still be very reliant upon the road and private vehicles. The purpose and scope didn't include year-round vegetation. It didn't examine the impacts that would have on other cities and roads around the gondola base station. And so many other things simply weren't included in the purpose and scope of this project. And I think it's really important that as we talk about Little Cottonwood Canyon and solutions for traffic, that we really consider what is happening is that it's a connected ecosystem, meaning that what you do in one canyon is going to impact the other canyons. So if Little Cottonwood Canyon has a toll and a gondola and is costing money, and Big Cottonwood Canyon isn't, then people who can't afford to recreate in Little Cottonwood Canyon might move to a different area. And so it's really important that we have a connected transportation system, something that serves all users trying to recreate in Little Cottonwood Canyon, something that works for the town of Alta. And we really can do this with buses. I would like to turn over the time to introduce Sydney.
Hi, my name is Sydney Smith. I'm a student at the University of Utah, and I'm here representing the future. I want my experience and the experiences of my parents recreating in the Central Wasatch Mountains to be preserved for future generations. The way I see it, life is like a series of investments into the things that we love. The fact of the matter is that as individuals, or even as groups, we don't operate in a vacuum. What we do impacts others for better or for worse. Think of the Leave No Trace program that is taught nowadays. The whole premise of that notion is that if we operate in a space, we leave it as if we hadn't been there. That not only shows respect for Mother Nature, but also for the people that will follow us. Every human deserves the right to responsibly engage in the natural environment. I think of the stories that my dad has recounted often of backpacking in Bell's Canyon with his friends in the early 90s and having the whole place to themselves. Jealous of that experience, I often wish to hike the trails along the Wasatch Front without half as much traffic as I now encounter. Rising population is a reality to which we must adjust. Not much we can do about that. However, imagine being a child years from now in a world where the gondola already spans Little Cottonwood Canyon. A child sitting on one of the bell towers, looking at the canyon, wishing to see that same view before mankind had consciously made the decision to put such an irreversible scar upon it. Not only do our investment decisions limit this space that future generations would have to make investments by building invasive infrastructure like the gondola, but it would also require investment from the public to support a cause they vehemently oppose. What do our investment decisions say about our character? What do they say about our government? During various periods for public commenting, UDOT received a record of 50,000 public comments on the gondola. In the fall of 2022, students for the Wasatch, among other community groups, reviewed 13,000 of these comments to the left. 89% of those comments opposed the gondola. As people living in this country, we have subscribed to the idea for centuries that our elected officials are meant to represent the will of the people. It seems that recently there's a rising dissatisfaction with the government for not serving the public as they would like. 89% of those comments oppose the gondola. As our elected officials, you are authorized to make investment decisions on our behalf. What kind of future will you be creating if you allow the public's opinion to be so blatantly disregarded? I'd now like to turn the time over to Margaret Burke to discuss impacts on Alta.
So I'm Margaret Burke, not to be confused with Margaret Burke White, the famous photographer. I wanted to let you know that I interviewed 11 individuals in the town, both owners of businesses as well as managers of those businesses. One of the key points that I got from that was keep Alta out. That is important to us. And the other thing is, as Craig mentioned, there was some misunderstanding or misperception about what was involved in the Cottonwood EIS and what it was going to be. And I think you've heard from Alan and Bob and Grace that what's there is not necessarily what people believe is there. So our assessment from working with these people, working from the interviews with these people, was that they don't have a correct assumption about what the gondola is and what it will do. It is to be in the same mode as a ski bus, 7 to 7, winter only, And it will, as was said, it will have to stop during avalanche control work and won't provide any help during an interlodge situation. So it's important that we recognize that the congestion that is here, that is supposed to be solved by this issue, is not, as was discussed by Alan. And there's some appendix materials in the packet that talk about in more detail. And Alan has a huge paper on it, which requires a lot of, excuse me, a lot of study to understand, but he knows what he's talking about. So the next thing I wanted to address was the impacts to Alta. And this is what is so critical to us, is that the issues are prickly. We have to get in the face in some ways of some people. And there are huge impacts to the town that are unique to the town and don't exist in other places. One of the things that we don't need is people in the wrong place. Putting people on the highway is a safety issue that we can avoid. We want to ensure that the watershed is protected, as does Salt Lake City Public Utilities. And again, the unique impact on the town of Alta is budgetary. Our police, our fire, and our paramedics are going to have a huge impact from more people in more places. So finally, what I want to talk about is the actions that you, the council, could take. You can join the suit, as was mentioned before, and there are 3 suits, and you can look at those and act, but you need to act soon. You can't wait for many more months. The record of decision came out in July. The time periods to join these suits are limited. I also encourage you to do a visitor use management study. This is something that is critical to find out how many people can be here without a negative impact on the sustainability of the town that would then eliminate Alta being Alta. That can be done with other partners. Salt Lake City Public Utilities has done a capacity study in 1989. And also the Environmental Center in Alta has worked with environmental issues, and the coalition is willing to work with you as well, and potentially there's additional funding out there. As other people have mentioned, you could pass a resolution opposing the gondola and looking for solutions that will work. Enforcing the traction law, which is something that Mike Vaughn has mentioned and Mike Ori has mentioned, enforcing that November 1 to May 1. You could also seek to get the UCA to restore the full bus service of lines 994 and 953, instead of having just the one. Parking reservations work, as is evidenced by the fact that we have much less trouble here than we have in Snowbird. Metering works. It's something that UDOT local people have wanted, but it's been rejected higher up. Tolling also will likely work. What I want is for you, the town council, to get engaged and to act. Because if you don't, what happens to Alta will be decided by others than Alta. I thank you for your time. We're available to answer questions both now and in the future. And if you need help resolving any of these things and the technical issues, we're here to help as well. Thank you.
A very professional set of statements. Are there some questions, comments, discussion right now from members of the town council, and particularly those who are on the screen or will be on the screen?
I don't have any questions at this time for them. I mean, I know we've put this on our schedule to talk about drafting a resolution. Just trying to be conscious that UDOT is a very important partner to the town of Alta. And I know we've talked about trying to draft something that, showed the town's preference for these other alternatives and not doing a gondola. So I do think we need to start working on that. Maybe that could be on the next town council meeting. Not sure.
John?
I was wondering if could we, and I apologize if I missed it, but
Could we get a little description of the three different lawsuits, who the different plaintiffs are, and a short, what's the difference among them?
Yeah, why,
Because I listed 5 based on what you were saying, Shay. They're entities, but only 3 lawsuits.
There are 3 lawsuits in Sabre Canyons. I believe there's 1 plaintiff. With the Salt Lake City, there are 3 plaintiffs, Metro, Sandy City, and Salt Lake City. In the Friends of Alta lawsuit, there are 7 different plaintiffs, including a not-for-profit IORAA, not sure what the initials stand for, and Canyon Guardians that Craig has started up. And then there are 5 individuals who we think can withstand a challenge of standing. That's always a procedural motion to say they don't have enough personal stake to warrant a court trial. And we did, ours is 95 pages long, and it covers the entire waterfront. We did not include the Forest Service nor the Federal Highway Administration. They have delegated their authority to UDOT. So UDOT is the only defendant thus far. If we discover in the process of moving through this, and all of this is going to be decided under what's called the Administrative Practices Act, APA. And most of those decisions are strictly by what the regulations say, what the statutes say. There's very little discovery in terms of depositions or things like that. The city's lawsuit and Metro Water District goes more to the statutes and regulations about clean water and their area of expertise. Laura Briefer, who you know from having worked at Alta, is head of Salt Lake City Public Utilities. They have 2 law firms, and we're, like I said, we had another coordinating meeting, and I'm hoping we can streamline that a bit. Does that answer your question, John?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, is it fair to say, I recently read the complaint you sent me a couple of weeks ago, Pat, was I think the 95-page complaint that was your lawsuit. That complaint seemed, you know, I thought it was much improved over the earlier version I had read in December. I would describe that lawsuit as primarily attacking the NEPA process. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, it is.
I thought it was much improved, particularly all of the part at the beginning with sort of personalizing the suit and the consequences of the gondola to, you know, 6 or 7 different people. I thought that was really helpful. It really brought the message home for me.
I was head of BLM. I was sued usually twice a day, and a lot of the lawsuits involved EISs. And so I got to know, and my staff got to know, the consulting groups that prepared good EISs and groups that didn't prepare the cut and paste kind. And I don't know exactly who the consulting group was, but I certainly wouldn't hire them.
Pat, just to clarify real quick, so I make sure I understand. The 3 different lawsuits, really, we've got the municipalities and the Metro Water Districts.
That's 1.
Which is 1. Friends of Alta is 2. Is Save Our Canyons the 3rd?
Correct.
Not neglecting the sub litigants, but Save Our Canyons is 3rd. Okay.
Right. Like I said, there are different plaintiffs in each of the 3, except for Sabre Canyons. And Grace, she could say if there were more than 1 plaintiff from their lawsuit. Again, go ahead, Grace.
I was gonna say, I can chime in. So we filed lawsuit on December 11th, and we're really challenging the NEPA process. And we did put the UDOT and the Forest Service in our lawsuit as well. And it's about 64 pages, and our full lawsuit can be found on sabercanyons.org under the issues tab. You're gonna see a no gondola in Little Cottonwood Canyon, and our full lawsuit is on there as well.
And I do believe Judge Shelby is the chief judge for the Utah Federal District Court. They have a conference usually once a week amongst all the judges. And I would be willing to bet quite a bit of money on the fact that it will get consolidated before 1 judge. We're hoping it'll be a Article 3 judge that is under the Constitution, as opposed to Save Our Canyons has a magistrate judge and Friends of Alta has a magistrate judge. But that's beyond our control.
And
Carolyn, you have-
is that consolidation critical for your fundraising or for you or for the other lawsuits? If it consolidates, will the funding become consolidated or will you continue to raise your own money?
In the best of all possible worlds, yes. In the real world, environmental groups, no.
Thank you.
Carolyn, you want to ask of this group anything?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
It is a privilege to be sitting here today, and I cannot believe the incredible diversity in this room of known political thoughts all coming together to try and find a solution. And I am incredibly touched by the youth here and online and the seniority who's present as well. It's incredible. And, you know, it's interesting having sat here and said, why aren't we doing something? And like, who are we offending when we like come forward? And what does it do with our partnership with UDOT? And how do we have that conversation and how do we come forward? And it is interesting, the fear that we have and the hesitation we have. And what does all that mean? So it's lovely to see this group and to hear everyone's opinion. And I want to reach out to so many of you individually and speak with you.
Yeah, Jen has my email, so if anybody has a question, legal-wise, please feel free to reach out. I do want to make one footnote. My grandfather used to deliver the mail from Park City to Brighton, Alta. So I have my wife and I were married here, my son was married here, so Alta's my place.
Okay.
Thanks.
Could you put back that slide for me? Yeah, that one. So here's some possible responses. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's smaller.
Yeah, I got it shrunk. I can read it because I have it in front of me. Yeah, there we go. So Alta is a municipality which is the most affected by the UDOT plans and the gondola in particular. So we have several near-term options to respond to what we've seen today and what we just heard. We could do nothing, which is not what I'm recommending. Okay, we could enact a resolution, and that resolution could endorse a subset of the UDOT plan, for instance, improve bus service and traction laws, as been mentioned here. It could advocate a serious attempt to alleviate the problem with buses and tolling, followed by a serious independent evaluation of their effectiveness. It could clearly stake a position in opposition to the gondola, and these are not necessarily mutually exclusive. It could call for a visitor capacity study before any further action is taken. And we know, you know, how many people can this place contain and still be at this place? We could join the suit filed by other governments, which has been mentioned, the Salt Lake City, Sandy, the Metro Water District as an additional plaintiff. We could file an independent amicus brief, or we could do something else. And it'll take us a while to come to a consensus on what to do. And I don't feel that we have the time in the next few minutes to come to that consensus. So I feel that we need to devote some serious time to how to hash this out. One thought is to have a work session before the March meeting with a draft or multiple drafts resolution. But I'm curious to hear the inputs from Dan and
I think it's important to, based on what we're hearing on the lawsuit and the time and a potential closing window, in order to keep all options open. I really support the mayor that we probably do a meeting open to the public that allows us to craft this position and explore it greater depth before March, so that we might
Before
be able,
March, okay.
so that we might be able to take whatever action we decide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, in which case we could call a special meeting of the town council for the sole purposes of developing a resolution on this issue. John and Elise? Or Elise and John?
I mean, whatever, we could do a special meeting or have a work session before the next council meeting. I mean, it'd be great if we could draft it in one meeting, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. So it's going to take us some time. So we may need to do both. But whatever works with everyone else. I know everyone has, tight schedules but I'm open to whatever.
Okay, John?
I think that I like these 4 sort of main action points here. The visitor capacity study has always been the missing piece. And I think most of us were somewhat disappointed with the CWC study once it finally came out, and it just really wasn't very on point, at least as far as our capacity in Little Cottonwood Canyon. And I think it's important to look at that capacity on a year-round basis, because there are, I don't know if Mike Morey's there, but there's really some of those fall weekends are the most crowded weekends of the year. So I think, it does matter that a capacity study should be on a year-round basis.
Okay,
I have something
go
to say.
ahead, sure.
So, we invited all these people here, right? And
Yes.
they want something from us, okay?
I think they've always told us what they wanted.
Right, but they all, except for Jacob, who actually said, hey, I can help you write something. But I assume all of them would like to say, hey, this is what I want specifically from the town. Are they allowed to actually send us an email that we can read with each of their individual thoughts that could help us work through what we ultimately choose to craft? Are they allowed to? Because they all introduced themselves and they all said, I'm against the gondola, but very few of them gave very concrete opinions.
Well, we do have material, we do have some of the content already, because you submitted it.
I mean, because I'm curious, like, what would Jake want from me as his town council person? And, I'm curious. I was gonna reach out to him and say, what is it that you want? So I'm just not sure how all the politics.
Well, let me invite the broad group here and in Zoom land to offer words that we could put in a resolution.
Carolyn, we obviously come from different places and have diverse opinions, but we've been coordinating on this. So if it's something like, we obviously want a resolution from the town, that's what we're begging for. But I think we can coordinate and come up with something from the group.
That's kind of what I'm wondering about. Like, you are all here passionately asking for something, and I want to honor that.
I will comment that Save Our Canyon worked very closely with the resolution that came out from Jenny Wilson, and they coordinated very closely on the language.
Do you want to say something else, Pat?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, do you mind standing? I just feel the audio recording.
Yeah,
It's super
And
helpful.
I would just really quick, I mean, I'm happy to take anybody's input on how we should draft this, but I just want to preface it with saying that UDOT is a very important partner to the town of Alta. And while I would love to hear more, and you're welcome to email all of us, our emails are on the town website with how you want to draft something, just realize that, we have a lot of working partnerships. UDOT plows our roads. UDOT does a bunch of stuff for us. They do avalanche control forecasting for us. So it's not, we're not looking for something to just blast UDOT. We want to come up with something that, expresses our opinion, but does it in a very professional and, way. Like, we are all very supportive of all the other alternatives in this EIS. But just realize if what you're going to give us, we'll take into consideration, but it does also have to go through our legal counsel. So yeah, we will welcome anything you want to draft for us, but, realize that this is going to take us a little bit of time. If this was such an easy thing for us to do, we would have done this a couple months ago. But this is something that has been weighing heavily on us for several months. And we have been trying to figure out a way to to express our opinions. But, you know, maintain our important partner relationships.
You want to say something quickly?
Quickly, I've worked in Congress in Washington 6 different times. And one of my jobs was to create a decision map that said, these are the options that you have. This is the upside, this is the downside. I wouldn't do that here. I would simply let you be the judge of the various options. And I'm trained on how to do that. That's what I do with my clients.
Got it. Okay, I think we'll move on to the next topic. Mike?
Well, since we're talking about, you might want to know our positions still, right?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
So, well, first let's talk a little about the ski season. Then
Yeah, okay, good.
Let's talk about the fun stuff.
Even better.
So we're halfway through the season. And skier visitation revenue numbers are kind of on par with last season. What we're seeing this year is a little different. We're seeing a higher number of first-time visitors to Alta. Well, every day I write the chair up to try to talk to people. Every day I find someone who's never been to Alta before. Season pass visitation's down, but the destination visitation is up. Is what we're seeing this year. The next, we did a little bit of the snowfall. Snowfall started out behind last season quite a bit. And we saw people flocking to Alta from the Park City area in large numbers. Coming and they were out in those places coming around because we had the best conditions in the state at that time. So that's kind of what's happening there. For our snowfall this year, while we're behind last season, which was a little over the top for us, we are a little bit ahead of our 40-year average. And we've had some great skiing the last few weeks in particular. Parking reservations, still working well. What we are seeing though, as demand continues to grow, instead of all the parking reservations being consumed by Friday night, they're now being consumed by Tuesday. Wow. So that demand is going up. We're seeing a lot of turnover. Well, we see some turnover of, because of the way it's set up, people can come up, ski in the morning 3 or 4 hours and leave. And got as many runs in as they would have before we put reservations in because everybody's not here at the same time. It's there. We are struggling, to say it lightly, with our neighbors down the street and not having a reservation system. It's really impacting now our employees. We are now bringing our employees in a half hour earlier, and paying them just to get them here in time to open the ski area. Because of all the traffic that's been created by first-time groups of curb parking down Canyon. We're starting to work a little bit more with with David, Devon, and Ryder on looking at how can we address some of that that's there. The feedback from our customers, I do have a number of customers that are saying, we may have to buy a snowbird pass next year because we just can't deal with the red snake at the end of the day. And we have people now that they either 2 a.m. to 2 o'clock just so they can get home in a reasonable amount of time. That's an issue that's a top priority on our list. We've talked about it. We need to work together and see if we can make some improvements. I've studied that and have some ideas and things for you that I hope we can address outside of the EIS, the issue that's there. That's kind of the stuff on that part. I'll choose my words carefully here in regards to the gondola. We are supportive of transportation improvements that address the issues. We do not think that the gondola is the complete answer. It does nothing for what we're seeing at the end of the day. The red snake, when the road gets slippery, doesn't solve those issues for us. Traction, like we're talking about traction. We have, we sent that letter last year to UDOT and others and the governor saying, can we address these issues? We're not part of the gondola, but we really need to address equity in merging through snowbird, elimination of roadside parking, and the illegal U-turns that are happening on the highway and bog down the traffic, and the main line being closed. As you know, when the main line between Alta and Snowbird is closed, so on a normal day, merging traffic for every one car that leaves Alta, at least 9 cars from Snowbird merging between the next two. You start to count the roadside parking that merges in, it goes up. It goes up, and so it slows it down to a crawl. If you close the main line, it's 500 cars between every two that merge with cars leaving Alta. From Snowbird because of all the entry points on the bypass. All the roadside parking. So if you just kind of do the math and exponentially grows. So we end up with gridlock in the town of Alta for 1 to 2 hours, which impacted all public transportation, all emergency services. It all comes to a standstill. So we're continuing to look at alternatives. And how do we address that? Can we do something, maybe with snow sheds and some berms to somehow keep the main line open, or treat it like we do the highway and you mitigate and get it open? So we can keep traffic flowing in and out of the town of Alta during that. So we're continuing to work on that. Looks like we're gonna possibly hire consultants to look at the main line issue and see where we can go with that going forward. So I think we'll probably in the next 30 days, we'll come back to the town and the community to see if we can jointly do a letter asking for some support again from some of these issues that are there. From the transportation standpoint, we are at Alta, we are trying to preserve the quality of this ski experience here. It's one of the reasons we implemented the reservation system. We don't want to overrun the ski experience. We want to preserve it, keep it like it is. And we don't want to be in the position we were 3 years ago, parking lots fill at 8:30, number of people to go. So they're all there, and then we turn around people for 3 hours that were trying to come to Canyon. So it's worked well in that regard from the parking space. Doing that. We continue to see many skiers across the country that continually to call us and talk to us and implement their parking reservations. So, and I'm appreciative and I want to thank the town of Alta for the cooperative agreement that we have to make it work for overnight and daytime parking. It's there. It's in Chris Colley, wherever he is. Thank you, Chris, for what you do. But in regards to, if we look forward to transportation solutions, my caution just to the town of Alta is, as the Lucy kind of addressed a little bit. So we've got a great working relationship with UDOT. We have a tenuous working relationship with Snowbird a little bit. And we, rather than irritating them and fighting them upright, I like the approach that we try to cooperatively work together for solutions. I think you can do that with a resolution that encourages support on the other areas, but doesn't outright say no to the gondola to them. It's like a last resort thing we can put out there so that we can keep people at the table, working at solutions and not strain some of the great working relationships we have in the town of Alta. Because we do have to all work together to make this work, and it's working. There are some challenges, regardless of what, if this was an easy problem, it would have been solved 40 years ago. It's the same problem we had 40 years ago. We had this one road that moves 1,200 cars an hour until it starts to stop. Or we have too many people trying to come at the same time. Bus service, we used to have 4 times the level of bus service we have now, but it only moves 3% of the skiers in the day. The more now the court show we got to have a bus arriving every 2 minutes. Without to be able to, I think it was, can't remember how much of the traffic it took, but $1 all of it still. So buses, if you've driven up the canyon, they do not go the speed limit. 30 miles an hour is max when they're coming up full of people. So they slow down traffic too. So it's like, there's a lot of parts and pieces to this that we look at. Getting people out of their cars, it's a challenge. We kind of think, we can get them out by tolling, we can get them out by these things. You gotta remember that about 60–70% of the people that come are not price sensitive. They'll just pay whatever, because they're more about experience. The people we hurt are the people that don't have those resources. And I'm concerned about keeping them in the mix, so we have to figure out how to make it work going forward in that regard. Buses will increase the avalanche health index in the canyon. You put more people in flight bus than you would by own cars. So that's a challenge a little bit too. It increases the risk of exposure that's there. So you know, I've looked at the Zion's, I mean, I spent some time talking to the people at Zion model and trying to understand it, see if it's an option here. It doesn't move as, I mean, they have buses, they move a lot, but there are far more people that still go through Zion's National Park in vehicles than on buses. It doesn't, it isn't a solve all problem, but it has merit. It's something that should be considered in the mix that's there. So, you know, I would just, I think it's great these guys have a lawsuit, and maybe it's gonna work through the process. But I think being in this canyon with the businesses that are here, the ski area, the town of Alta, and even Snowbird, we should try to work together, be collaborative to try to come up with a solution without. And I'm afraid if we get Snowbird mad at us, makes it even harder to move forward. And we really like all the things we do with UDOT and how we help each other, and we plow things for them and they plow things for us, and we make it work, even when we're outside of our own jurisdiction sometimes, but we do what's best for the community overall. Whatever we do, we need to preserve that and be careful that we don't put that into jeopardy. As far as, yeah, we're up to 1% of the people riding the bus this year because of the change in budget. That's there. I did have a call today from UTA, not UTA, from UDOT, and I think they're gonna, maybe about a special service district taking the canyons out of the UTA service or something. So that we can have our own bus service. So we should talk about if that's of interest to the town going forward. As far as a visitor use capacity study, that's a challenging, and once again, because the Forest Service has taken the position that the forests have their national goals and the way they look at it, they don't listen to a local visitor use study. And I think you would find too, if you looked at Alta and what we're doing, our density of skiers and people we bring for the training services we have is significantly less than most of the other ski areas in the country. Because that's not the experience we're trying to provide. We can go look at, 2,200 acres versus land that Snowbird, that Brighton has, and Brighton's doing 100,000 more skier visits a year than we are. They're backing them in, it's dense over there, but it's not what we have here. We do, one of our focuses is almost every weekend now, it is getting 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, we have really slow traffic getting out of Snowbird because of all of the guy congestion that's leaving there, especially with all that roadside parking, which has expanded beyond where it's been before. And we're looking at how we're gonna address that with UDOT, and we're gonna, at some point in time, we're gonna have a heart-to-heart here pretty soon with them and the Forest Service and see if there's something we can do. The comment that was made by this group about the EIS that the gondola would not reduce cars in the vehicles in the canyon, I believe is somewhat accurate. In talking with both UDOT, is they've looked at projecting where business would be in 2050 and said that the gondola will reduce 30% of the traffic in 2050 at certain growth rates. So, I think we need to deal with, I can't get our neighbor to commit that they'll remove roadside parking if they get a gondola, which is a concern to me. We are concerned and want to make sure as we work through this process with UDOT and others that we don't bring too many people.
What too many people?
We don't want to bring too many people out.
Right.
I mean, we need to have the right balance, and we think that fortunately with some of these other alternatives that are on the table, we can get, I mean, the busiest day of Alta in our history was last year on a reservation day, the last day of the season. And we had almost 1,000 more people than we'd ever had before. And that was with.
And how many is that?
But I'll just tell you, it was more than we'd ever had. And it was more than actually we wanted for that day. So, yeah, you wanted me to say it, didn't you? I did. But it's, so I think there is solutions that can work
moving forward. Yes, there are some advantages to the gondola. There's not as much for the town of Alta and as they would be for down the street. So, anyway. Question?
Yeah, questions?
Well, I would just say that I think you guys have done a great job of managing the capacity this year. I've skied about 20 days or so, and really there hasn't been a single day that I thought there were too many people out the ski area. And I'm sure there've been a few, but when I think about the capacity use study, it's only so that we have something to do the math backwards from. That I think that would be useful. But I think you guys have done a great job of managing your demand, and the reservation system's working, and the red snake hasn't been as abysmal as it's been in the past. I haven't heard too many 3-hour stories this year, a couple of 1 and 2 hour stories, but overall, I think you guys have done a great job from the management side of addressing these issues, and we appreciate that.
And we appreciate that too. So, and we are always open to comments. If you see things that maybe we could do better to try to address it. I mean, we're always in this mode of what can we do a little better? I ask that question all the time. People I write it on the chair list, and I'm pleased when they just say, it's great. Don't just fix the traffic. Everything else, don't change anything else in the street. We love it. The way it is. Thank you very much.
Okay, Carolyn or?
Yeah, I just add one thing, I think, then it's not a question for Mike, but it's just this observation that, it's the relationship between ASL and Snowbird and how they're affected, or we're a distinct, different body with different responsibilities to the community.
We are.
And I think we need to advance our relationship with Snowbird. I don't think we've done, historically, since my time here, I don't think we've done that. I mean, I'm town council for my 2 meetings. And I invest that time. I think we need to do that more. Because I think we can, that's how we'll get them on board. We might find 3-way consensus on some things.
Carolyn, anything else?
No, Mike addressed that.
Okay, well, let's move on to questions concerning departmental reports.
Could Chris give us a little more on the Forest Service engagement paragraph? I found this particularly encouraging.
Yeah, sure thing, John. Let me just pull it up.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no, we had a series of meetings with folks from the Forest Service, really to talk about separate issues. They were general introductory meetings, so they'll be followed by more meetings, but the topics were discussing possible locations for trail-in style restrooms, recreation visitor amenities in the highway corridor. The topic of possibly doing some water and sewer master planning, and whether there be any Forest Service permitting or legal process we have to fulfill. And we'd have a separate meeting to talk about the land under our buildings and whether we might be able to adjust the parcel boundaries either through, an exchange out of the central land that we own that's vacant or a special use permit, but it did come up. And we've talked about that on and off with the district ranger for the last couple of years. So if we get to the point where we're proposing to expand the footprint of this building, for instance, it's good to have started the conversation at the very least.
Absolutely, it's good. For those of us that are old enough to remember the MOU and what that meant, it's been a long drought with the Forest Service these last 8 or 10 years in terms of a relationship. And, any progress is worthy of applause. So I'm very encouraged by you reaching out to them and at least getting the ball rolling. I think that's great.
Thanks.
I've got something for Marshall though. Anybody else have something for Chris though, since he's at the podium?
Thanks for all our organization for the retreat. That was a really.
He's gonna go there,
Later.
You deserve the credit.
Okay, but it was great. It's part of your thing.
So for the Marshal's office, I've got a question on the heels of the retreat. One of the things that we all had consensus on was the prioritization of development of the marshal's office. And what I'd like to get from the marshal's office too is a more structured architecture on these three things. One was staffing. Based on the complexity of the crimes we've been getting, the increase in the crimes we're getting, we're missing some of these specificities that we don't, they're not resident, we don't have a detective. And we're dealing with those types of crimes. You know, as you know, Carolyn, there's the facilities issue to deal with those items as well. And then I think there's the equipment stuff. So if we, Mike, if we could get that from you in a near term, so we can start shaping that, because I think we've got funding requirements that we'd have to put that against. And I also think from a town standpoint, because of the legal aspects of this from law enforcement, we might be able to leverage grants and some other things to underwrite this as we advance this force, because my filter tends to be, if we have twice the amount of people coming up here, regardless of capacity things, what do we need? And I think we have to start that now. I don't know if you need to add to that, or is that, can you get that for us?
I can tell you what's on my mind, if that's what you're asking.
I'm always asking what's on your mind.
Sure. I know, I actually have some notes on the subject as it happens. Yeah, so as we talked about at the retreat, and you know, as we've talked about a lot recently in our monthly consent agenda items, you know, we are dealing with things we're not used to dealing with at a volume we're not used to dealing with either. You know, it's easy to forget that we're 8 miles away from one of the biggest population centers in the state, and it doesn't take much for a problem to find its way from the greater Salt Lake Valley into Little Cottonwood Canyon. And unfortunately, yeah, we are seeing some of that occur. And people are changing. And what we are realizing is that we as an agency need to change with the realities we're confronted with. I think we've got three, and Chris Colley and I started talking about this at length. We've got three major areas we'd like to focus in, going into a fourth area, and that is recruiting and retention of kind of people that we need to have here for our police agency. We need wages, progressive step plan. It allows us to be competitive as an employer, which we are not currently competitive with the agencies that we recruit against for police employees. And I might add our dispatch staff as well. I think, and Chris Otto's been exploring this, one of the disadvantages we have in recruiting is we are in a different retirement situation than other law enforcement agencies. We are not in the public safety retirement system, which is a 25-year plan currently, with a different financial contribution from the employer. We are presently in a 30-year non-contributory retirement system. And that was based on, you know, what the town could do at the time. It makes it really hard for us to steal quality people from other agencies when they can't just lateral over into our retirement system, or if they do, they lose a good benefit. So recruiting and retention of personnel, and the next major goal is right sizing the police department. And as Dan pointed out, we're coming up a little short on manpower, human power. Regularly, we've had 3 major cases in the last 30 days. Each of those involved us calling in staff off duty. Fortunately, we've been able to find people willing to come up and help. We'd like to have a skilled investigator who can also help us fill in some gaps on Tuesdays with patrol schedule. I think we need to take a close look at our dispatch manager and the amount of administrative time that she needs to have freed up to do her job properly. She can't always do that at a busy dispatch console. Facilities. We need to identify some place that we can work
from, that is different from what we have. Ideally, that place would be a street level, ADA compliant facility where we can drive up to, have a workstation and have, some security features in it where we can conduct interviews, do fingerprinting and do basic police functions, you know, store some of our sensitive items. We are watching the planning process for this building, and if we think with the right design, that kind of facility could work well for us. So, we need to concentrate on fully developed operations manuals, for our police and dispatch that are, up to date with industry standards. We've got some good products that we purchased to help us with that. We've recently brought in a part-time employee from another agency who's a specialist, so we're hoping to get better and better. But we need to do better policy management, better training, and move into present day. You know, the expectations of law enforcement don't forgive us for being a small agency. We're expected to do it right. More and more we're being audited, you know, on those expectations. The reason I'm pushing you all and Chris Colley so hard on this is the fourth point, and that is succession. I think I've made it pretty well known that I'm looking to retire in the next 4 years and change. I know at least one other senior deputy that's on the same timetable. We want to make sure that when that day comes, you have everything that you need in a quality police department. Ideally, we'd like to have some qualified people on staff ready to assume the roles that we're vacating. So those are my couple of points, and they are we're going to take a lot of staff time, a lot of planning, and in all likelihood a fair amount of money.
You prompted him.
I've seen him before. But I think for us as a town, and especially the elected body, you know, one of the things, my metric for this is a catastrophic failure because of the complexities and the requirements of modern law enforcement and the standards they have to adhere. And he's talking about this to some extent, and we don't want to bog down on that. But we can't have that catastrophic failure because that takes our town safety, public safety, and law enforcement out of our hands. We end up slipping down a canyon, which is, I think everyone would agree, is unacceptable. Right. And so as I look at that, I think this is where we have to spend some time on it. And it was a clear identification at that public retreat.
Time and money.
It's both of those things. And I think with the timeline we've got with the current marshal, it's really imperative that we start to get on this. And I think there are some resources we can use, but I just think it's getting so much more complex and we've got to make sure we do it. Anyway, thanks.
And thank you for the opportunity to say something. And, you know, I keep this on my phone in case people want to hear me say it again. You know, I'll throw in one other thing. Yeah. This coming July, the Unified Police Department, who currently serves the canyons, is splitting with the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. The Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office will have the law enforcement mission up through Snowbird and up to the town of Alta boundary. That's a given. We know that outcome. They will be a much smaller agency than we know them to be present day. Some of the things they've historically filled voids for us on may or may not be available when that day comes. So we need to become more self-sufficient than we ever have been. And we need to be doing it right all the time. You know, you've all seen the examples every time you turn on the TV that Gabby Petito in Moab. That's a really expensive check that town has to write for the conduct of their officers. So you need a competent, fully capable police department. And the choices are really to do it under your own roof or to hire another agency to do it for you. And you historically said we want our own. So those are the steps we think we need to take to get there.
What I got out of that is that the police department is at a great disadvantage when it comes to stealing people. Did you?
And I think that's important.
So key to our government employees, and if you're asking people to work another 5 years at an already lower rate, that is, who would?
And we already do ask significantly more outside the scope of their
Yeah.
stated job responsibilities, and that cannot go away.
No.
And I agree with the down canyon, the UPD, great as they are to facilitate safety in the canyon and transportation, are not gonna do anything for the town of Alta with the problems that we know we have.
And and we ask them to do so much more and they fulfill it so well back.
Yeah. Ted Spencer's my favorite state.
Yeah, okay.
So anyway,
All right, any other questions concerning the department reports? So let's move on to, approval of the consent agenda, town council meeting minutes, January 11th town council retreat meeting, staff and finance reports.
So moved.
Yeah. So moved. Seconded. Discussion. No discussion. Do we have to get a roll call vote? Okay, all in favor of approving these minutes, these items? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, approved. All right, next item is mayor's report. Well, this will be a change of point case.
time for me to jump again.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Thank you, Coach Funk. Super, oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. As I say, this is a sharp change of pace. This is the ever popular astronomy report. This month has an added day, the 29th, which we know, because the year is not really 365 days long. It's 365.256 days long. So if we're just exactly 365 plus a quarter, we would save up those quarters, and every 4 years, we'd add another day. Well, we do that, and it's called February 29th. But what do we do that 6 at the end? What we do with that 6 at the end is that on the centuries, we leave out the February 29th. So in 2100, 2200, 2300, there won't be a February 29th. And if you're keeping your calendar up to then, you can note that. However, people will say, oh, I remember the year 2000 with the Y2K kerfuffle and the close election and the hanging chads and all that stuff. And it did have a February 29th. So what are you talking about? Well, it turns out that centuries which are divisible by 400, like 1600, 2000, 2400, do have a February 29th. And all this is to say is that astronomers are long-term thinkers. And so are we. And toward that end, on January 11th, we had a retreat to look at the long term. Now, it didn't exactly extend into centuries, but it did. And Chris is going to report on that at some length here a little bit later in the agenda. But I felt that from my standpoint, a significant value of this exercise was to cement a greater sense of community and teamwork among the town council and staff. We're working together toward a common goal and the continued health of our community. Okay. Next point is I note that this week is the 10th anniversary of the signing of an agreement between the town and the Schrontz Estate concerning development of 22 acres of land referred to as the Patsy Marley property in the Albion Basin. In the ensuing decade, there have been numerous discussions as to how to proceed, but the actual construction has been limited to the installation of a water line from the Bay City mine up to the upper areas of the property. And recently, the estate has entertained the idea of a cluster development on the lower 44 acres in lieu of 10 homes scattered across the other 20 acres. And we're in discussions about that. Next item is we're carefully monitoring the legislative session, keeping watch for bills that would affect our town. And fortunately, we have the aid of the Utah League of Cities and Towns to do this. I'm pleased to say that Chris Otto was up to speed on these kinds of things and has some background in that, and is great to have him on our staff to be a helpful watchdog. On January 19th, Chris Crawley and I met with Zinnia Wilson of the Forest Service to discuss a trailhead toilet. And Chris Crawley has already spoken to that. And a few years ago, a good friend of mine who lived in Alta passed away. And there came into my possession a collection of clippings that he had assembled over a couple of decades. And I was browsing through them recently. And I was struck by the many expressions of love for this place, just the way it is. And visitors would come back year after year and marvel at the many qualities of the many qualities of Utah had not significantly changed. And I see our collective challenge is to make sure that future visitors will feel the same way. So the next meeting is on Wednesday, March 13th, starting at 4 p.m. It'll be hybrid. And I may or may not talk about sidereal. Okay, next item on the agenda is the discussion of possible action to adopt Elise Morgan as the mayor pro tem. I've asked Elise if she would continue to serve in that capacity, which she has very effectively in the past. And she has said, at least when I talked to her, that she would. You want to say anything more about that, Elise?
So far it's been a pretty easy job. I haven't really had to do much. So, but I think I've led one town council meeting where you were not able to make it. But yeah.
Okay. Okay, any discussion on appointing Elise as our mayor pro tem? Okay, none. If none.
So moved.
So moved. So
So
moved.
moved.
Seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Post. Oh, good. All right. Taking care of that item.
Fastest item on the agenda.
Excuse me, fastest item, yes. And
Easiest item on the agenda.
Yes. And we're actually back on schedule.
Yeah.
So discussion of possible action to adopt ordinance 2024-0-3, updating the town code, meetings, procedures, and conduct. Who's going to speak to that?
Would you like me to?
That'd be great, Jen.
So this really goes hand in hand with the resolution that follows, so I don't know that we can perfectly talk about this in a vacuum. But as last month, the town council was reviewing its rules and procedures and asked for a series of changes. And as we were looking at that resolution and how it interacted with our code, we realized that maybe we didn't need to, we were kind of being repetitive in two places. And I think that the intent of the council is to follow state code. And so in doing, so we can really essentially, if you so choose, remove this part of the code. We don't need it. And we've run that through legal counsel and whatnot. So, but I don't know if there are specific questions about that.
Say that again. We can remove this part.
Of our code. So this is the town code, and then it would basically, it defaults to state code.
Huh. I thought
And then
that's
how
I think that's where we were before we started this, was that we were using the state code and then we decided they wanted us to adopt our own rules? Or am I
Well,
missing?
they do tell you to adopt your own rules, yes, which we've done by resolution.
Okay, is that R4?
Yes.
And that's okay just like it is?
Well, you have.
Oh, because it has an attachment, right?
Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but, so I think in the end, if the council so chooses, then you would be following state code and this resolution to set the specific meeting rules and regulations. In the end, if you got rid of, if you passed ordinance 2024-03.
Three.
So there's a, yeah, maybe Molly, if you wanna- so the track changes, really it just removes the specificity that was in town code.
So we would adopt attachment 1. Or would we also adopt attachment 1 of R4?
Right, so that, yes, so that's where, so there's 2 steps in this, right?
Mhm.
There's 3 things at play here, right? You have state code, you have town code, and then you have the town resolution, or you have a resolution that says what the rules and the procedures are. So in the research that we've done, we've said, okay, if the intent is to follow state code, we don't actually need the town code piece of this. And with state code and with our own resolution, that should guide us.
Yeah, and be
Is that
compliant.
articulating it well enough for everybody?
Yeah, no.
Sorry.
I'm tracking.
The state
Okay.
takes over.
But then
Yes, and
our
so,
resolution includes attachment 1, which is where the sort of problematic language was.
correct, John. Yeah. So I don't know if we want to talk, if you want to just vote on the ordinance first and then go to the resolution, or if you want to talk about the resolution and then kind of come back to the ordinance, just since, I mean, they are related. You can get rid of this if you want, which is the ordinance.
You can get rid of 03.
Sorry, yes.
Yes, right.
By get rid of, I mean, you can strike the language that's in the town code.
Right.
But not, you're not proposing to get rid of attachment 1.
I am not.
Yeah.
No.
I think that's the right way to go. You know, and I guess I just want to say, I don't really have a whole lot to say about attachment 1. You know, I don't love it, but I also know that change is hard. We've gone through a lot of change this year with the whole switch to the empowered town manager. And you know, if you want to leave the 10-day thing in there, I'm okay with that. I'd like it. I was under the impression the other day, Jen, when we were talking that we're at our last meeting, that you were saying that the 10 days applied to either the mayor or the 2 council members. It applied to them equally. Is that correct?
And so let me just, for everybody's sake, so John is talking about some suggested edits. You have a printout, and this is on 2024 R4. You, Molly, that other version, if you want to pull up, that has some highlights.
Oh, yeah, I've actually got.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Keep it
Okay.
tonight, 'cause I got mine.
This is not something that I have sent to anyone.
Right.
Okay, but maybe you've gotten it another means. Okay, so what John is talking about is rule 2, the agenda. And he was suggesting that we remove the 10-day requirement.
Yes. Okay.
And so, and John, I was hoping that we could have a dialogue about that and so that we could understand.
I was actually going to suggest a slightly different tact, because I think that the 10-day notice one seems to be the most problematic of the changes. So maybe we could talk about some of the lower hanging fruit and see if we can dispatch with those issues and then come back to this one.
Sure.
I'm ready to throw in the towel on this one. Just give you a little preview.
Well, I would like to find a solution that works for the council and the staff, and I think we can do that. I
do
feel
too.
comfortable about
Let's talk about, do you have any trouble with the edits that I did for D and E under 8?
So on D,
Yeah.
no, you were suggesting that, so basically, I'm gonna read this out loud so that everybody in the audience can follow along too. So for internal, so this is the section that talks about the rules of decorum. And it says, for internal communications between the council or the council and the staff, council shall make best efforts to respond promptly upon receiving any, I think it's supposed to say communication requiring a response.
Yes.
Internal communications between councils shall not violate, OPMA. So I'm fine with that. I think as a matter of practice, you know, we'll harass you. You haven't responded to something we need your response to, you know.
And we're pledging to respond. We're pledging
Yeah.
to respond promptly. So, I mean, I think that's great.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear that that's fine with you. I think seems like the least stressful one of these. I mean, you know, it just sort of gets away. 48 hours makes me nervous because those of us who are retired now occasionally don't check our email in every day or every week even, you know, so if that one works for you, that's just great.
It does. I do want to point out, though, that what I think the intent is behind this point is that it is a motivating factor for the council to actually stay in communication with the staff. That's what I think the root of this is that you stay engaged, right?
Okay.
So I just.
So
wanna make
that's
that
the
point.
intent.
I
is to-
believe so.
Is to promote communication
Yes.
between the staff and the council.
Right, so that we can continue to move things forward. And if, you know, if council is not checking their email and not up to date on things, that makes it hard. So,
Yeah, it's also volunteer work for us, you know, and so, yeah, I think you had a balance there, but if you're comfortable with these words, I certainly am, and we could move on to the next one, which is E. How did you
Yes.
feel about that change?
So, I'll read that again out loud just for the benefit of everybody. So, prior to any council meeting, council members shall notify the town clerk if they will be attending a council meeting in person, electronically, or that they cannot attend the meeting. And what was stricken from this was the 7-day requirement. And so, from my standpoint, I think this is, you know, when we're holding meetings, we need to have a quorum. And I think this was put in there to be a motivating factor for the council to communicate with the staff, whether you're going to be at the meeting or not. I think we've all recognized and had conversations about emergency situations, things come up that were unplanned. I think you all do a very good job of communicating with me about that sort of stuff. So I think the risk here, right? You all are wedded to each other, right? So if all of a sudden 3 of you have an emergency, we're not gonna be able to have a meeting. And that there is a potential, I think it is so rare and unlikely, but there is a potential that, you know, within 2 days of a meeting, I get a slew of last minute communications, and then I have to tell you that meeting gets canceled. I think that's very unlikely, but that is, I think with this proposed language, that is the risk.
Can I suggest that the stricken part, which says at least 7 days before the meeting or as soon as possible, that you replace those words with as soon as practical?
Well, so you'd rather actually, so the way this is written now is saying basically that all council members will, regardless of whether you're attending in any format or not attending, that you are communicating whatever your intent is to me.
Prior
And
to
so
the meeting,
the
prior to the
suggestion-
meeting.
Prior to the meeting. So my suggestion was gonna be, what I could do is when I send out the meeting packet, I can maybe be a little bit more diligent about asking you to reply to me. And maybe like some sort of tool like that helps prompt you.
Some of
to
us
respond.
need like a little extra special needs, and you've been very kind. And if you ask me a direct question, I will answer a direct question. Sometimes I get lost in the fluff.
Yeah.
And it's not, I just get lost in us.
There's a lot, those
Yeah.
packets contain a lot, so I
I think
mean.
we've had outstanding attendance really since Roger took over, and you know, I agree with you. And if it becomes problematic down the road, even if there's a single time where we don't show up with a quorum, I'd say we could come and revisit it. I think that's great if you're okay with that, because I was going to say to you that I I'm okay with the 10-day notice thing. I know it's been problematic, that seems to have been kind of the big rub this week. And, like I was saying, we've had a lot of change this year. And if you need that 10-day notice to feel good about it, then let's do that. Let's give you the 10-day notice on the agenda control issue.
Maybe so is everybody okay with the section E that we were kind of just discussing?
Yeah.
I mean, is anybody concerned about
No.
having to tell me what your intent is for the upcoming meeting? Okay.
No.
Okay.
So
So what
Cameron has his hand up.
he does.
Okay.
Cameron, do you want to speak for a second?
Yeah, I just thought it might be helpful just for me to put the procedures in context a little bit operationally. So the procedures that we're passing in the resolution is simply the preferred practice. Okay. If for example, a council member doesn't give notice, there is no legal effect, right? It doesn't affect their standing as an elected official. There's no penalty to that. This is simply the preferred process, right? And so the balance here is we're trying to allow staff enough time to react and schedule and compile all the documents. So I just wanted to highlight that anything that's in here, if it doesn't work, given some unforeseen circumstance, we're not locked into this as much as an ordinance or a statute or something of that nature, right? Even with the 10 days, even with the notification, any of the procedures in here, if there was an issue that the council member felt strongly about, that needed to be on the council, they could require that be put on the agenda, right? The council meeting is run by the council. And so even whatever these procedures are, that's how we want things to work because it will work best that way. But if there's something outside of these procedures, we're not left with, it's not like we can't do anything that violates these. It's just a procedure.
Well, that's super helpful and enlightening, and appreciate that input. Like I said, there's been a lot of change. I know this 10-day notice has been a big deal for you, Jen, and I think that we should just go ahead and leave the 10-day notice in, and I appreciate you making the other changes. And
For the benefit of everybody else, do we want to kind of have that conversation really quick though about the pros and the cons? So staff had, when we made the suggestion in the Rule 2 agenda, had suggested that there's 10 days. And that is a reflection of our practice in the office of how we produce the packet, like what it takes. And that's kind of the timing that we're shooting for. And so we were just trying to hold everybody to that same standard. That doesn't mean that you're never going to have an amended agenda or something else. But I wonder, John, to me, it seems like the root of the problem here is not necessarily about the 10 days, but it's more about like what is being put on the agenda that maybe I think you've, as a council member, felt a little bit disenfranchised from. Knowing what's like you don't know what's on the agenda until you get the packet. And so in my email to you, I was trying to ask, is there other things that staff can do to help the council members? So like one of the suggestions I had was maybe at council meetings, at the end of every council meeting, I kind of tell you my list of what I have for the next council meeting.
I thought that was a great idea. I thought that was a great idea, like a preview. You could even do it when you send us the minutes to review, which is usually a couple of days after the meeting. You could put hey, here's a sneak peek at next month's agenda. Let me know if you have any questions. I could even take it on that timing. Might even be better than doing it at the end of the meeting, but either way would be great. And I think the one thing is I'm not sure that the English in this sentence says what we all think it says. I think the idea was that it's the mayor or any two council members with 10 days notice can put something on the agenda. And that making the mayor and the two council members' rights the same is, I think I've heard you say a couple of times that's what you think it is, but I'm not sure it says that. Because I think the comma's in the wrong place.
Jen, I have one question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, the way I read it is items may be placed on the agenda either by the mayor Or with 10 days later,
Right.
10 days later, two council
The
persons.
deadline should apply to all parties.
But if you,
Right. That's right.
oh, that's what you're saying.
That's
Yeah,
what,
that
I
is
think
what
that
she
is the
meant.
intent of what we all thought it meant, but when John's pointing out that, yeah, the English doesn't match that. We
Right.
want the same requirement for
That's
the
right.
mayor and the two council members.
As someone who pretends to write books in a day job,
Yes.
I agree with that sentence.
I went and watched last month's meeting last night again, or this part of last month's meeting, and now it was actually really comforting because I think you and I were saying the same thing, and I just didn't realize it.
Yeah,
So-
and I think, I agree, Jen, but the implication here under the Rule 2 agenda is also that 10 days notice is kind of what we get from you guys as well, because that's part of your staffing process. You guys use it.
Yeah, there's a delay there
Yeah,
between like it being finalized and then us getting the materials to
Right.
you, but,
so I think if you just move that in front of the mayor, the wording is fine, right? If we want to leave 10 days in there.
I could go either way on this. I want everybody, again, this is like a guiding principle. I want everybody to kind of understand the timeline that we're typically operating on. If this is a guidance for, if you know when we're producing stuff, it gives you a timeline on communicating back with us. So that's why I thought it was helpful to have it in there.
Yeah.
If we move the 10 days in front of the mayor, what it does, in my mind, is it freezes the agenda 10 days before the meeting. And if something comes up in those intervening 10 days, it ought to be on the agenda. This seems to preclude it.
Then you would have an amended agenda.
Except
you
the
could ask staff
Cameron,
to
except the Cameron says, because it's a resolution, it doesn't really preclude it, and then we could make an exception. Is that correct, Cameron?
Well, no, resolutions are how the town passes policy. The resolution implements this procedures. So in the hierarchy, you have state statute, county ordinance, town code, town resolutions, and then policies and procedures. So this is the lowest level of binding authority, and it can be changed by the town whenever it wants.
But
It's
not just on the fly.
Yeah,
We'd
kind of on the fly. I mean, this is how we prefer things to be handled, right? But if this procedure is going to disadvantage us, we can say, we're going to suspend this procedure in this instance because it's going to disadvantage us, and we want to do this
and
other
amend the
thing.
agenda.
Yeah.
That's totally fine with me, what he's just saying there, if that works for you, Jen. I mean, I honestly think that if this happens once in the remaining time of Roger and my service, I'll be stunned, and once, I would say it's gonna be the outside number. So, I'm comfortable with everything Cameron just said, and if you want to leave the 10 days in, it's okay, because if it was really an emergency, we would waive it.
That's right.
Okay. If it has that flexibility, I'm fine with it, which is almost to say that it doesn't have much teeth.
It's
It
guidance.
doesn't, but that's okay.
Yeah, okay, that's
That's
fine.
all right.
So, shall we vote on this resolution?
Yes, I just want to make sure that we do the vote right to accept the edits
All
that
right.
John is suggesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate working through that with you, John.
Yeah, no problem. I think we got to a good place. So on Rule 2, the agenda, we're gonna move the 10-day notice in front of the mayor.
Okay.
And then, in section D, we are gonna accept what is in yellow. Well, right, we're gonna accept John's suggestions, except for the word communication that's stricken is not actually gonna be stricken.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So that's becomes a sentence.
The 48 hours is not stricken? Or is it-
That is stricken.
Yeah, right. Got it.
Correct, but the word communication is struck here, but we're not, because it has to say respond promptly upon receiving any communication requiring a response,
Yep.
is how it will read.
Yep.
Okay, and then, we're gonna accept as it's written with the strikes in E as well.
Okay. That is the resolution we're voting on.
If someone wants to motion,
I motion that. Yeah, all right.
Second.
Okay.
sorry,
Discussion?
what was the order?
John,
John moved.
Dan.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate that.
any further discussion? All in favor?
I'm gonna do a roll call vote, sorry, because it's.
Oh, sure, okay.
Resolutions and ordinances, Carolyn, that's when we do the roll call vote.
Hey, I'm just here to
Councilwoman. Yeah.
follow the rules.
Okay, Mayor Burke,
Aye.
Councilmember Ansel,
Aye.
Councilmember Burr,
Aye.
Councilmember Morgan,
Aye.
and Councilmember Schilling.
Yes, I think it's a yes on that.
Yeah, it does say yes, no in the state code. Thank you all very much.
Okay,
Can we go back to the ordinance? Sorry, we were talking about the ordinance 2024-03, and then we jumped into the resolution. I think we might want to go back
Yeah.
to the ordinance.
okay, back to the ordinance.
Ordinance 2024-03.
Item number 9. Because we actually passed 10.
Yeah, sorry, out of order.
Well, very exciting.
I lost that.
This is striking the town code regarding.
Okay, so, yeah, striking the town code. So,
We'll follow state code and the resolution. that we just
yes.
passed.
Yeah, the one on the screen where all the stuff was lined out. Yeah. Is there any further discussion of this?
No.
Okay. Someone like to make a motion to accept this?
I'm going to accept ordinance 2024-0-3 as written.
I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Ansel?
We need a second, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yes, a second.
I'm getting lost.
She didn't call me yet, I'm waiting.
Okay, so we have the second,
Yeah, we did have a second.
Okay, Councilmember Ansel,
Yes, for Dan.
Thank you.
Councilmember Burr,
Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Aye.
Councilmember Schilling,
Yes, I read that book.
and Mayor Burke.
Yes.
Motion passes, thank you.
All right, discussion, item 11, discussion of possible action to amend the town council meeting schedule through June 2024. And this really just moves the start time to 4 o'clock, as discussed last time.
I very much really love that.
Okay,
I move that we accept that change to the schedule.
all right.
Thanks.
Any further discussion? It doesn't actually have to have a motion, does it?
You're approving this.
Yeah, okay,
Oh,
Yeah, you want a motion in a second.
all right. Any discussion by Elise or John on the start time moving to 4 o'clock? Elise, you okay with that?
Sounds good.
All right. John, I think you're nodding acceptance. All right, I move that we accept the revised meeting schedule through June 2024.
second.
Okay. Further discussion? In favor? Yes, aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Good. Discussion on possible action to adopt ordinance 2024-04 for civil code enforcement. Now, this is a little more depth to it, and is, someone gonna speak to this?
I can introduce the topic. It's really more Cameron Platt and Mike Maury's topic, and Jen and Molly with their hands on the justice court have some special expertise in it as well. We've been talking about adopting an ordinance to create a civil code enforcement program for the town of Alta since I think it was about September. Most municipalities in the state of Utah and other states have a civil code enforcement program. We feel we're behind the ball and potentially exposed by not having one. Civil code enforcement is a more efficient and sort of appropriately scaled code enforcement option for a lot of municipal ordinances that are state criminal offenses. So what we have before you is a draft ordinance, the bulk of which you've seen in the past. Cameron kind of tuned it up and got the final version in the packet for us today. It does a number of things, amongst which is to set up a separate due process forum. It's not, a hearing in the town of Alta Justice Court, it's a hearing before a specially appointed, administrative law judge. So, so we need to set up that, we need to adopt, some specific, fines in the fee schedule. And then we also need to adopt, create and implement, kind of an administrative back-end program, to run the administrative law judge hearing process, track the offenses, the fines and so forth. But passing this ordinance, which again, we've discussed, several times in previous council meetings, is the first step. If you do so, then, we'll have to come back to you with a timeline for how we'll take all those other steps. But this really is the first step, and I think I get the impression the council feels, like we've discussed it pretty thoroughly. So, and if you have any more technical questions, I'd ask Cameron and Mike to speak to them.
I had one, to make sure I understood with clarity. When you sent the agenda out to us, Cameron hasn't changed anything since we received this and we read it. Okay, I'm not sure, okay.
No, just since a previous version, since like.
Okay, all right. I had one typo on the last page. It's such an annoying thing, but there's no A and B. You don't need the A in front of there because we struck paragraph B under penalty for failure to comply. So there's an A still there. You can delete the A because there's no B. My copy editor would be proud of me. You strike through the copy, you scroll down the
Right, I was gonna say the.
There are no distinct subsections.
Right.
Well, there's only a single subsection and
So it
there's
doesn't-
no part A.
Right, anyway,
Yeah.
I didn't have any, I mean, I know we talked about this, I thought it was.
Right on.
Yeah, well then.
Okay, any further discussion? Jen, you look like you're going to say something.
I'm waiting for the roll call.
Oh, all
You're
right.
ready.
Okay, we're now,
We have to,
is this a roll call vote?
Yes, because it's
Okay.
your motion. Yeah.
So I'll tell you what, I will move that we adopt ordinance 2024-04 for civil code enforcement.
Second. Oh.
Mary Louise, second.
Do you want that to include that edit?
Yes. As edited. Okay.
I will do a roll call vote.
Good.
Councilmember Byrne,
Yay. Yes.
Councilmember Morgan,
Yes.
Councilmember Schilling,
yes.
Mayor Burke,
Yes.
and Councilmember Ansel.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Right, next item is review and discussion about a budget committee. Chris, you wanna say something about this?
Yeah, I can introduce this one as well, and, this time I'll probably have to pass it up to Jen, if I can answer your questions. We're coming up on budget season. The next 3 months, will be substantially focused in the office, and at least for part of our council meeting process on reviewing draft budgets, reviewing major policy decisions with regard to what we collect and spend next year. In previous years, we've done that review over the course of a series of meetings by the Town of Alta Budget Committee, so-called. The Budget Committee has not previously been formally appointed. It never had a governing document, and we never formally appointed members in public meetings or anything like that. The mayor kind of chose council members to serve. We did operate the meetings under the Open and Public Meetings Act, so the meetings were noticed. We took minutes and the council would approve them. The purpose of the committee has been to essentially review budget documents drafted by staff and recommend them to the council. We get a little bit sideways with the budget committee, I think, over the past couple of years. I don't know that we so much got sideways as much as it was that the lack of kind of a formal handling, or designation of the budget committee, the lack of a governing document, the lack of formal appointments, caused us to have questions we couldn't answer, for lack of those things. So we all agreed, that if we were gonna have a budget committee, it was time to, put some sideboards around it. And so that's why we brought this, proposed budget committee charter before you today for your consideration. One of the difficulties we've come up against over the past couple of years is that budget committee meetings, it is an additional burden. It has been an additional burden to serve on the budget committee for council members who volunteer to do so, the extra compensation or anything like that. And we're all strained for time. So we've been a little bit unsure coming into this budget cycle if we do have a budget committee who would serve. And I don't think we've necessarily resolved that today in any sort of final way. But in order to address that, the charter that we included in the packet does provide an option for us to appoint non-elected officials, town of Alta residents or property owners, I believe it is, to serve on the committee in order to reduce the need to have a full quorum of the town council. I think there's an advantage to having a quorum of the town council on the committee. We always have
A quorum, you said?
a quorum. The committee's always been a quorum of the council. And one of the advantages amongst others is that any product of the committee, any recommendation of the committee is likely to be adopted by the council since it's, essentially endorsed to some extent by a quorum of the council. So that is an advantage to that. So anyway, I think, the staff report recommends adopting the budget committee charter, creating a budget committee by adopting the budget committee charter. If we do that, we'll have some follow-up actions to take. We'll actually have to appoint some budget committee members and schedule some meetings or however the committee is going to convene. So I guess I'd invite you guys to discuss the recommendation. I know John had specific comments about that. He shared with staff via email. And that's my introduction for you. My mouth is really dry.
It's well delivered though.
Yeah. So you're suggesting that, am I allowed to speak?
Yes, sure.
So you're suggesting that citizens of Alta serve in this committee. I thought I read that you wanted 2 volunteers from the town council. I missed the part about.
Well, we do.
Citizens.
Yes.
Because in general, people who would volunteer, and I assume it's a volunteer position, may have some self-serving interest.
Well, we also had verbiage in there about it'd be a broad cross-section. It's available as a broad cross-section to the community, whatever that might be.
It's a mechanism to reduce the need. We think it's advantageous to have a dedicated forum to review budget drafts. We'd like that forum to be in the context of a public meeting. At least, the staff would prefer that. And we had the idea that if we can't retain, membership of 3 council members, that we could include that provision in the charter to have property owners, I believe, serve on taxpayers.
It says residents and or property owners is how we came down on the language.
Yeah.
So that was. We stop and talk about this one for a second. I get where you're coming from, and I think, trying to reduce the burden on the council, obviously I want to applaud that, but I think it's going to be very problematic having members of the public on the committee. This is just sort of my free advice. And that's because how many of those people are actually going to do the state auditor training that you really should do if you're going to be on this committee? You need to do not only the introductory government one, but you probably should do the basic and intermediate finance ones. So I think it's a cheery idea having some of the public on the committee, but I don't know how you do that without holding them to the same standard as an elected official. So I think that's going to be a little problematic, but
I'd add to that,
I too
one thing we can do that facilitates that participation is, I mean, it's open meeting anyway, it should be open to the public, right? We don't have, it should be based on transparency, so people can come and they can contribute to that. I expect 0 people to do so because it's a budget meeting, but I think it's still, it serves our citizens that we're responsible for. And if you want a quorum out of it, then it's a 3-member person, one of which I would suggest is you as the mayor.
If
And the question is,
council would
would you
like to strike this provision, I don't think there's gonna be much,
You expect a lot of
From-
input
from-
from the people here?
well, from the staff.
Okay.
I mean, it's an idea to reduce the burden on the council, but if you don't like it, we're behind striking that.
And well, in my mind, it's all, I mean.
my
the
feeling
budget
on
committee-
it, go ahead, Dan.
I should say, the budget committee is here to help facilitate this in advance of that budgetary cycle, so we're prepared for things. And so I believe in the spirit of what we're trying to do, right? That's,
Yeah,
okay,
that's appreciated.
I just don't have any experience like Elise does or John. Or,
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, I've been on the budget committee for a while. And it is, I see where staff is coming from. It is very hard to get a group together when you just have council members and staff. I'm not necessarily opposed to the citizens on it. I mean, I want to be transparent in our process, and if some of our voters feel that having a few citizens on the committee, you know, will help or give a different perspective, they're not, I mean, you got to remember the committee's not voting on this. The council votes and approves on the budget. The committee just makes recommendations and has discussions. I would just say that maybe there's a way we could write this that I don't want it to just be, let's say a scenario comes up where the meeting is just the staff and let's say the 2 residents, and that's all that shows up for the meeting. That makes me a little more wary, whereas if at least we have like at one town council member, the staff and whoever we choose to be on this committee from the public, I'm not opposed to the public, you know, having a few public people on there. I don't know if we're going to get a lot of people interested in being on the budget committee from our residents, but I'm not opposed to it. This isn't a voting body. They just make recommendations. My view of being on the budget committee has always been the support that the staff needs to get this process done. It's not fun for the staff to do the budget, you know, and it's not fun to go through these budget committees. Chris is like, you know, maybe saying it is fun. I don't know, but it's more that like I just want to make sure that you guys have what you need to bring it forward to the town council on a timely matter so that we can vote and get it voted on, because we have criteria and dates when we need to pass this. If you guys feel that some people on the, you know, some residents would help this process, great. But again, I would maybe just structure it a little bit so that at least one town council member or the mayor is present with, you know, the staff, maybe the residents, whoever want to volunteer to be on this. But I'm not opposed to it. So,
If there was some resident that it made sense that,
sure.
if there was some resident that it made sense to, that was really all about it and was going to do the work, I think that's great. Personally, I think having the 2 staff members, Jen and Chris, on the committee, along with 2 council people and maybe 1 other person, or 3 council people if you can get to 3. But I would much prefer to see us involve the town manager and the budget officer on the committee. This is supposed to be, and I don't know whether Cameron's still online, but you know, this used to be that the budget that the committee sent up the food chain was supposed to be the mayor's budget. Now it's supposed to be the town manager's budget. We have a budget officer. It just is counterintuitive to me that those people wouldn't be on the committee, along with the mayor. That's now you're up to 3, and maybe 1 more person or 2 more people. So I'd rather you look to the staff and have them actually be committee members, because it is your budget, Chris, that's coming up to us. It is the town manager's budget. So it's counterintuitive to me that maybe you wouldn't, actually be on the committee. I don't really see that.
I think that's fine, John. I think if we want the charter to call that out, that's fine. I think that we've essentially been envisioning the same thing. you know, just maybe with, yeah, I think we've been envisioning the same conversation effectively that involves the town manager and the budget officer. I think the way I've been envisioning it is that the committee makes, you know, takes recommendations from the staff that then get presented to the council. But I think if you want the charter to call out staff specifically, that's fine. That's fine with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're wearing two hats in the equation. You're proposing some of the numbers, many of the numbers, but then you're also the guy it's your budget ultimately that goes up the line. The only other one that I thought was a little out there for me is due to the advisory role of the budget committee, a good faith effort should be made by all committee members to base recommendations to the council on the consensus of the group. This reminds me of that, was it the Cottonwood Canyons Commission? The predecessor that you had to pledge that you'd support only the consensus opinion, you wouldn't voice your, I hated that. I hated that provision then too, you know. Who's gonna give up their ability to voice what council member is gonna give up their ability to vocalize their own views at the council where, you know, the rubber really meets the road in order to be on this committee? I mean, I don't think anybody's gonna want to do that, are they? I mean, I wouldn't. You know what I mean? I don't understand why we would try to pin people to, you know, sort of blind support for whatever comes out of the committee.
Can I ask for Craig to renounce his status as a citizen and resume his status as treasurer and comment on this?
Yeah, I think John's point about having Chris and Jim there, it is correct. At the same time, the whole point of having a budget committee is to get some outside voices. So they've got, you can get lost in your own echo chamber and you need other smart people around to actually bounce ideas off of. And the budget is complicated enough that you want to do that in a group setting that hopefully doesn't burn up all the town council's time. So to me, that's the main purpose of having the budget committee. I think the other thing where the budget committee might be useful is in helping make important process improvements. When I look at the budget committee last year, I think the main thing that we did that was different is we introduced the idea of having an outside consultant actually redo our staff comp. Listening to Mike Morey today, I would say maybe we have the wrong comparables in there for at least his division. But I think those kinds of process improvements, which aren't going to happen every year, but I think that's a good place to have a forum to discuss the pros and cons of them before you take it to the town council.
Okay, I think we're of an opinion collectively that we need a budget committee. Number one. Number two, I think we have secondly decided that it's appropriate to have staff members on the budget committee, and those two staff would be Chris and Jen.
And Craig. I think we errantly left Craig off the list. Why wouldn't Craig be on this committee?
Well, Craig has so many, he's a citizen and he's a staff member. And so in either role, he's eligible.
Can I interject and ask Cameron, I don't know if you're able to answer a question.
Yeah, I'm on. Sorry, my connection died, so I'm on my phone.
Oh, no worries. So the notion of so the charter now says that we operate on a consensus basis. That's the way it's worked in the past. I recognize the problems that has caused recently. Notion of staff and elected officials serving on a committee and voting sort of with an equivalent weight just strikes me as a violation between like legislative and administrative roles, or a blurring of that line, which to me is maybe it just sounds too much like a textbook, but do you have any thoughts on that, Cameron?
Yeah, so I think to Councilmember Burns' point, it is an executive branch committee that is is essentially doing the work of putting together a proposed budget. And then that proposed budget is going to the council. Now, when the council members are on the budget committee, they are budget committee members. They are not acting as council members. But when the proposed budget goes to the town council, then they are acting as council members. And so there is some, I guess, commingling of work, but the committee is an executive branch committee. And so I don't know if that helps at all, but it's not inappropriate to have it that way. And I think the way that the discussion has gone would be fine to have staff members and council members. The two main issues are, if you have a quorum of council members, then it has to be a public meeting, and all the requirements for that. And if the committee votes and makes a recommendation rather than simply proposes the budget, I know it may be splitting hairs, but if they vote on a recommendation to the council, that also would likely fall under the Open Public Meetings Act. And so other than those two sort of landmines, I think everything else, the way you've discussed it, would be fine.
And I know on past budget committees, and I know we're trying to form maybe something different. On past budget committees, we never really voted. I don't ever remember casting a vote in a committee. It was more that we would push on, like, I think like Cameron was saying, is we would make a recommendation to the council. I mean, it's very rarely that we as the committee had a hard time deciding between maybe two budget items. And if we did, we would kind of do what the staff does for a town council meeting. We would propose as a committee option A, option B, but we would need the council to move this forward and vote on it. I don't know. I mean, you could do either one with a budget committee. You could have them vote on it, or again, just make recommendations to the council.
Would you be more comfortable serving on it, Chris and Jen, if you weren't voting and it just stayed on a recommendation basis? I don't personally see anything wrong with you being on the committee and voting, just for the record. Cameron, do you? Just that simple, narrow question. Is there anything improper about Chris and Jen serving on the committee and voting when votes are taken?
No, not at all.
And Cameron's reframing of it as an executive branch committee is definitely a different way than I think we've thought about it in the past, which was as a subcommittee of the council, but I can live with that.
But I would offer that it also facilitates forward progress.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it becomes an efficient vehicle, which is the whole intent of this thing, is to take some of the burden off of these meetings and do the proper preparation and have the discussion.
Yes.
It's a pre-discussion.
Right,
That's
and it's
all.
still coming to the town council.
We still are going to have council budget work sessions, right? There's still going to be at least one council budget work session, right? That's where the council will get to put its input into the mix.
Would you,
Sorry,
sorry,
can I
Go ahead.
just finish my thought? Which
Sure.
is, I'm very much with the lease. We don't really need to vote because there's no formal authority. To me, the biggest, if there's a disagreement, it's a pre-discussion that helps you form that disagreement in an articulate manner so that when you bring it in front of the town council, you go, oh, here's the pro, here's the con, and it's all sort of pre-baked, because there are complex issues in here. So I wouldn't get too worried about whether we have a vote or not have a vote. And frankly, I don't see a real purpose to need a vote if you don't have any formal power.
I mean, a split decision recommendation is gonna be that's damaged goods, right? Like,
No,
the
not
council gets a
necessarily.
budget that 3 out of 5 budget committee members approved and or recommended and 2 didn't, then that's evidence on the record.
In the past, that, I mean, we've had a couple, where we had to make and it wasn't a split decision on the committee. It was more just a tough decision. Budgets were tight and we had to make a decision on whether to move forward with something or cut something. And the committee at the time couldn't decide. And so I don't know if it's necessarily that it's like splitting hairs. It's more just like you have to make a recommendation as a committee. And then it's part of our job as the council to make that tough decision. And, you know, and maybe the committee can make it, maybe they can't. And that's happened in the past where we needed help. You know, ACVB was a great example in the past where we had a hard time as a committee, but the council had to be the one to make the decision. And again, that's maybe where the voting and non-voting comes in. If you're voting as a committee and you guys can't come to a vote, whereas if you're just making a recommendation before the council, it's a little different. The other reason I like the fact that staff is on it is, you know, you have 4 or 5 budget committee meetings from January or December, basically through April or May. I don't know if you guys can always get a consensus on when everybody can meet. So the fact that if there's a couple staff members, the treasurer, you guys can move forward with this process, kind of like Dan was saying, without getting stalled out. Like if for some reason the council can't show up, you guys can at least move forward and have a discussion. In past, it's always been this wish-washy thing on whether a council member or the mayor had to be present. And that's kind of where I think we've been getting stuck. That's another reason why I'm not against the resident advisors to the committee. I just want this process to move forward for us and you guys.
Me too. I want us to be able to move things. For
Okay.
you. So,
It's really that you're sending up to the council a well fleshed out starting point for the council to go through it, hopefully in 1, maybe 2 meetings at the most. The council goes through all of that preliminary work and adopts it and can make changes if it wants to, but you're really just trying to set up that well fleshed out starting point is how I see it.
Budget commission. Although I mean, you have presidential commissions, and you have gubernatorial commissions, they can make recommendations, but they don't have any binding effect.
The only binding effect that in this charter is written in is the approval of minutes.
Well, that's hardly a constraint. It's just,
It's the record of what.
Self-referential.
yeah.
So practical question. So, we've had typically 3 budget committee meetings in the past.
In Paran.
Does that sound right?
In the spring, yes.
Okay. So maybe it's not a question, maybe I'm just, trying to envision out loud what the timeline here is gonna look like. So we would have a March budget committee meeting, an April budget committee meeting, and a May budget committee meeting, and a full council work session on the budget.
Sounds good.
And then I think sometimes there was a December or a November budget committee meeting because we would always try to amend the budget in December. So that sometimes would happen, sometimes it wouldn't.
Okay. So I guess the only other thing I would say is that I think, you know, we have language in this charter. We need to decide what the final language is going to be. So, Jen, are you prepared to sort of facilitate a conversation?
What I'm hearing is 2 main things. One being the addition of the town manager and the town clerk to the committee.
Budget officer.
Or budget officer, whatever. I'm fine with that. I mean, I don't think this committee would function without our participation and support
Right.
anyway. So I'm trying to understand what the real value in putting us, and maybe the value is that if we're talking about a quorum of that committee itself, then that does help us move forward when not all of the committee members.
Because you're the other key
So for
components.
that reason alone, I guess I'm on board.
Operationally, you 2 guys are gonna be there no matter what.
Right.
And Cameron's observation, this is an executive branch committee, I mean, that really actually, I think we could have a functional meeting with us and a council member. We'd have a functional budget committee meeting, we could work through some topics, we could get some input, it wouldn't be the same amount of depth of input, maybe, but it would be the input we need. to move
And
forward. So that's
I don't know whether Craig's indicating a willingness to serve or not, and it's probably, I'm not putting him on the spot about it, but I also think not having 3 council members makes tons of sense. So that you can clean up some of the details after the meeting and keep the thing rolling without actually having a meeting, but by, you know, emailing amongst yourself. So if it was me, I would want to not have 3 council members. I'd want to have 2 council members. So if you chose to take action, not at a meeting, or clean up some details with an email, it would be okay and you wouldn't be violating the act.
Okay. Clearly, we don't want to violate the act, but I think we also want to stay within the spirit of the act. That is, that the transactions are public, visible. So even if we had 2 council persons, and I would recommend that we record the meetings and that those recordings be
The
available.
way the charter is written is that we will follow OPMA.
Okay.
So regardless of the number of council meetings, we will continue to be open and transparent and help the dialogue.
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
Easy
I
to,
feel very strongly about that.
yeah, that's an easy game.
I think follow-up from a meeting can be delivered by staff to the committee, but I don't think that there should be a discussion happening via email, if that's fair.
Yeah, it should take place in the meeting.
Yeah, only reason to have 3 town council members is, like you have pointed out many times, it's hard to get people together. Everyone's busy. So the only reason to have 3 council members would be that most likely 1 of or 2 of them will not be able to make a meeting. I've seen the doodle polls. Sometimes a meeting suggestion conflicts with almost everybody. So that'd be the only reason to have 3 named on the committee. They don't necessarily have to be present, but it would just give options, I think, for at least 1 or all 3 to attend. And I agree. I think this should be transparent. I don't think we should be doing anything outside the.
So to point out, as the charter is written, it says a minimum of 2 council members, and then so that's a minimum, right?
For attendance to hold the meeting.
No, that is, well,
For
that's
appointment.
for appointment on the charter. I think from my standpoint, I would prefer that 3 council members are, but the provision of allowing a resident or a property owner is it's another option, right? So the process of getting people on this committee is that Chris, as the town manager, is actually through advise and consent going to ask the council. So there is going to be a vetting process for everybody that is put on this committee, unless we're specifically naming positions like the budget officer, the town manager, the treasurer. Does that kind of make sense, that people aren't just put on the committee?
Yeah.
That it's an act by the council?
Definitely.
Okay. The other potential edit was in the decision-making census, where we used the word consensus, and I'm just trying to think of how I can, should we have committee members to be.
You know, Jen, in order for us to take something from this in action and move it
Yeah.
forward, there has to be some sort of documentation that says we're in agreement, this should go to the council. So I think you have to have something along that line in there. I'm not looking at it, right, that one, but.
Are you looking for some way to describe the public vote that we were talking
It
about?
was not, no, well, it's in the decision-making, we don't specifically have that in here, so maybe that is, maybe we need to work on that. And I don't know that we're gonna get that done right this second.
Yeah, I'd suggest that, I know time is tight because we need to have 3 meetings in 3 months, and
Well-
that starts next month.
But we weren't gonna, even if we adopt this, if, I think what we could do to move this forward is that we could work on some edits. In the March meeting, we can bring it back, make sure we're all clear, and Chris can have his ideas of who he wants to put on the budget committee at that time, because it's not gonna happen any faster than that anyways.
And we just hold that March meeting after the town council meeting for the budget, because this is our next time to
Well,
enact
just
this
to-
in the town council.
I don't know that that's gonna happen.
Okay.
I don't know that anybody can handle a 5-hour meeting that day.
No.
But yes, it would happen after, not necessarily directly after.
No, I don't mean have that day.
Yes, okay.
There's no way.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but we could still hold it in the month of March and
Yeah.
get what you guys have identified as we want 3 meetings before June.
That's the way we've done it in the past.
Yeah,
Okay.
it works well.
Okay.
And I think we even sometimes, I can recall years where we basically got it done in 2 meetings, and then we had a work session in May for the tentative budget. That was that.
Right.
So I think we,
And one of the other things just to point out in here is that we've said, we haven't attached the budget committee meetings to the council meetings. But what we've said is that we will try to put them together so that if council members are serving, if we don't have a work session, say we could have a budget committee meeting in the hour before the council meeting. But it's not to say that we have to do it that way.
Yeah, right.
So it gives us some, like, we will try because I think it's less of a burden on the council members that are on, but we're not totally attached to that.
Okay, so look, let's wind this up here if we can, but, good deal of discussion on the resolution adopting budget committee charter. Are we ready to vote on adopting it?
No.
No.
yeah,
No,
we're not.
I think, yeah.
We're gonna make edits to the charter.
Okay, so we will defer that.
Great
And-
discussion though, I appreciate it. That was great. Thank you, John.
Chris, with your approval, I would like to defer the retreat recap. I think that the package you had in the consent agenda was really quite complete.
That's fine with me. I do just want to take the opportunity once again to say thank you to you all for giving us a whole day of your time. It was a snowy day. You were taking phone calls and emails and surveys over the holidays. We just really wanted to demonstrate to you that how much we enjoyed and got out of that session and that we heard you. And I think you guys deserve a lot of credit for honing in and working well together to produce something that, you know, I feel pretty good about the way we captured that in 5 or 6 slides. And I also really appreciate the Marshal for being prepared to speak to what was really one of our biggest short-term to-dos out of that. So
yeah,
we've got a ton more work to do, and I really think the budget process is the next place where this, where we activate the outcomes to the retreat. So that's why I'm looking forward to the budget.
Good. Okay, any new business? I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Wow.
Oh, can I mention one quick one? Oh, did I miss the new business?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, new business.
I just thought I'd throw this out there in case anybody knows more about it than I do. I recently read about a new type of tourism called regenerative tourism. Regenerative tourism. So rather than sustainable tourism, the goal is that the tourism activity makes the world a better place. That you leave the world cleaner than it was before, that you're enhancing the environment, you're enhancing the community in which the tourist activity is taking place. Just an interesting topic, and I think if anybody sees anything go by that's about regenerative tourism, I'd appreciate you sending it on to me. It's kind of I think it's a really interesting area.
Yeah. I'll go on a trip with you, John. That sounds great.
Hey, go to Nicaragua, go surfing.
I'm not going back to Nicaragua.
In a different role.
Yeah. There's places I can't go.
Any other new business? Okay, well, are we ready for a motion?
Yes.
All right, is that? Yes? Maybe that needs moved, okay. Any objections to, or do we have to take a roll to?
No, we don't. I'm just wondering, who's you're first, you're second.
Yeah.
All right, got it. Okay. All
Thank you.
in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned.
Great meeting. Thank you all.
Good night, everybody.